Night wrapped itself around the wilderness like a burial cloth. Thunder rolled across the black sky as smoke climbed from the peak of Mount Sinai. Fire pulsed inside the mountain. The ground trembled beneath the feet of thousands. Men, women, and children stood frozen in terror while one man walked upward alone. Moses disappeared into cloud, darkness, and consuming fire. Every step carried him farther from the people he led and deeper into the presence of a God they no longer understood. Fear spread through the camp. Some believed they would never see him again. It was a strange contradiction. Israel had just escaped slavery in Egypt. The sea had opened before them. Their chains were gone, yet freedom itself had led them to a mountain that shook with terror. The God who rescued them now appeared dangerous, untouchable, almost unbearable to approach. And yet this moment would shape everything that followed: their laws, worship, morality, identity, and relationship with God for generations. Most people think Sinai was only about the 10 Commandments. But the mountain was about something far greater. God was not merely giving rules to a nation. He was revealing his nature, holiness, covenant, and presence. The true revelation on the mountain was not stone tablets. It was the terrifying reality that a holy God wanted to dwell among broken people. This is the story of fear and glory, rebellion and covenant, fire and mercy. And the hidden meaning behind what Moses truly encountered on the mountain. At the time, Israel was nothing more than a nation of former slaves wandering a brutal desert with no homeland, army, government, or identity. And standing in the middle of that fragile nation was Moses, prophet, judge, mediator, and leader, carrying a burden almost impossible to survive. Then God called him higher up the mountain, and everything changed. Morning broke over the wilderness, but this was no normal sunrise. Dark clouds rolled over Mount Sinai as thunder cracked across the sky. Fire flashed inside the smoke that covered the mountain, and the ground beneath Israel's feet began to shake. Then came the sound that froze every heart in the camp, a loud trumpet blast that seemed to come from heaven itself. It grew louder and louder until no one could ignore it. The people stood trembling at the foot of the mountain. Parents pulled their children close. Elders stared upward in fear. No one dared move forward. Smoke poured from Sinai like a giant furnace because the Lord had descended upon it in fire. The mountain looked alive. To the people of the ancient world, mountains were places where heaven and earth touched. Kings built temples on high places because they believed the gods ruled from above. But Sinai was different. This was not a false god made from stone or gold. The living God had come down himself. Israel had cried out for freedom when they suffered in Egypt. They wanted rescue. They wanted safety. But now they faced something greater than Pharaoh's armies. They stood before holiness itself. And holiness was terrifying. Deep inside, the people wanted God's blessings, but they were afraid of God's presence. They wanted protection without surrender, freedom without transformation. Yet God had still called them here. He had brought weak, fearful, imperfect people to the foot of his mountain for a reason. But why would a holy God invite broken people into covenant with him at all? Then the voice came from the fire. It rolled across the mountain with power greater than the thunder itself. Every person standing below heard the words of God echo through the smoke and darkness. This was not the voice of a king, a prophet, or a warrior. The Creator of heaven and earth was speaking directly to his people. But the first words were not rules. They were relationship. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Before God spoke a single command, he reminded Israel of what he had already done for them. He had rescued them. He had broken Pharaoh's power. He had carried them through the sea and led them into freedom. The commandments did not begin with, earn my love. They began with, you already belong to me. Then came the commands. Do not worship other gods. Do not make idols. Honor your father and mother. Do not steal. Do not murder. Do not lie. These laws were not chains meant to crush people. They were words meant to shape a nation that reflected the heart of God. Sinai revealed something humanity still struggles to understand today. People often try to prove their worth through performance. They believe they must earn love, approval, or acceptance by doing everything perfectly. But God spoke grace before responsibility. Obedience was never the path to rescue. Rescue came first. Israel obeyed because they had already been redeemed. And that changed everything. Moses disappeared into the cloud on Mount Sinai, and the days began to pass. One day became a week. One week became many. For 40 days and 40 nights, the mountain remained covered with fire and smoke while the people waited below. At first, they watched with fear and wonder. But slowly, fear turned into panic. The people gathered around Aaron and demanded answers. Moses was gone, and they did not know if he would ever return. The silence frightened them, so they asked Aaron to make them gods they could see. Gold earrings were collected from the camp. The fire melted them down. Then Aaron shaped the metal into a calf. The same people who had walked through the Red Sea now bowed before an idol made by human hands. It seems shocking, but their sin was not only rebellion. It was fear. They could not handle waiting for a God they could not see. Trust felt too uncertain, so they replaced invisible faith with something visible and familiar. Human hearts still do the same thing today. People look for something they can control. Money, power, success, approval, anything that feels safer than trusting God in silence. But while the camp below fell deeper into sin, Moses stood high on the mountain before the Lord. God saw the corruption spreading through Israel, and his anger burned against the nation. In that moment, Moses stood between divine judgment and complete destruction. One man carrying the weight of a broken people. And then Moses came down carrying something Israel was not ready to receive. Moses came down from Mount Sinai carrying the stone tablets in his hands. They were covered with the words of God, written by God himself. The covenant between heaven and Israel rested in those stones. But before Moses reached the camp, he heard something below. Singing, shouting, celebration. Then he saw it. The golden calf stood in the center of the camp while the people danced around it. The same nation that had trembled before God's fire now bowed before an idol made from melted gold. Anger burned through Moses like a storm. He lifted the tablets high into the air and threw them onto the ground. The stones shattered at the foot of the mountain. The breaking of the tablets meant more than broken rock. It showed what had already happened inside the hearts of the people. The covenant had been shattered before they had even fully received it. Israel had promised faithfulness, yet they turned away almost immediately. This moment became one of the darkest failures in the history of the nation. Again and again, Israel would struggle with idols, fear, and disobedience. And in many ways, humanity still follows the same path. God reaches out to restore people, and people often destroy the very thing meant to save them. Moses had every reason to walk away from the nation. God's judgment was near. The people deserved punishment, but Moses did not abandon them. Instead, he stood before God and pleaded for mercy. One man speaking for thousands. One man asking God not to destroy the people he rescued from Egypt. And somehow, in the middle of failure, mercy still remained. Sinai was not the only mountain where heaven touched earth. Throughout the Bible, the same pictures appear again and again. Mountains, clouds, fire, the presence of God coming close to people. Long before Sinai, God walked with humanity in the Garden of Eden. It was a place of perfect closeness between God and man. But sin broke that relationship, and people were driven away from his presence. Then came Sinai, a mountain covered in cloud and fire where God once again came down to meet humanity. Later, these same signs appeared in the temple. God's presence filled the holy place like a cloud. The people could not enter because his glory was too great. Centuries later, another mountain became filled with divine light. Jesus stood on the Mount of Transfiguration while his face shone with glory and a cloud surrounded him. The voice of God spoke once more from heaven. Then came Pentecost, not on a mountain this time, but among ordinary people. Fire rested above the followers of Jesus as God's Spirit came down to dwell within them. The pattern was always pointing toward the same truth. God keeps moving toward humanity even after humanity keeps failing him. That is the deeper meaning behind Sinai. The story is not only about laws written on stone tablets. It is about a holy God making a way to live near broken people again. The mountain was both beautiful and terrifying because divine closeness changes everything. God's presence brings wonder, but it also exposes every hidden sin and every false idol. Yet even so, he still invites people to come near. The story of the golden calf is not only about Israel standing in the desert long ago. It is also about us. The people at Sinai grew afraid when Moses stayed on the mountain too long. The fire, the smoke, and the silence became too heavy for them to bear. They wanted something they could see, something they could control, So they built an idol with their own hands. People still do the same thing today. When life feels uncertain, many run toward things that promise safety. Some chase money because they fear losing control. Others chase success because they want to feel important. Some search for comfort so they never have to face pain. Others live for power, praise, or the approval of strangers. These things may look different from a golden calf, but the human heart has not changed very much. Silence is hard for people. Waiting is hard too. When God seems quiet, fear grows louder. And fear often pushes people to build substitutes. Something fast, something visible, something that feels easier to trust. But the shocking part of the Sinai story is not only Israel's failure. It is God's mercy. The people broke the covenant almost as soon as they received it. Yet God did not destroy them completely. He still led them. He still stayed with them. Even after judgment came, mercy remained beside it. That is why Sinai matters so deeply. The mountain became proof that human failure does not always end the story. Even after collapse, grace can still rise from the ashes. After the noise of judgment faded and the camp grew quiet again, Moses spoke to God with a bold request. He did not ask for power. He did not ask for victory over enemies. He asked for something deeper. Show me your glory. It is one of the most human moments in the entire Sinai story. Israel had failed. Fear had spread through the camp. The covenant had been broken almost as soon as it was given. Yet Moses still wanted to be near God. Even after all the chaos, his greatest desire was closeness. And God answered him. In Exodus chapter 33, God told Moses that no man could fully see his face and live. The glory was too great, too holy, too powerful. So God placed Moses in the crack of a rock and covered him with his hand as his presence passed by. Moses saw only a glimpse, but even that small moment changed everything. Many people remember Sinai because of the thunder, the smoke, and the fire. But those were not the greatest miracles on the mountain. The greatest miracle was that God stayed. He remained with people who failed him. He walked with people who doubted him. He continued leading hearts that were weak and afraid. Sinai revealed not only the holiness of God, but also his mercy. That changes the meaning of the whole story. The answer to human brokenness was never human strength. It was the presence of God. Even in failure, even in fear, his presence remained the one thing that could still lead people forward. The mountain still speaks. Its story echoes through every part of the journey. Fire covered the peak. Fear shook the people below. A covenant was given in the middle of thunder and smoke. Then came failure, rebellion, and heartbreak. Yet mercy stood beside judgment, and the presence of God remained in the middle of it all. That is the true meaning of Sinai. Moses did not simply climb a mountain to receive commandments carved into stone. He entered a place where holiness and mercy met together. He stood before a God who was powerful enough to shake the earth, yet loving enough to remain with broken people. That encounter changed him forever. Sinai teaches something people still struggle to understand today. Real transformation does not begin when people become perfect. It begins when they stop running from the presence of God. The people feared the fire on the mountain, but Moses kept walking upward. Step by step, he moved closer to the very thing that terrified everyone else. And in that place, he found more than law. He found the presence of God. The mountain burned with fire, smoke, and glory. But another fire burned there too. It burned inside the heart of a man who kept climbing toward God even when the path was frightening. That is why Sinai still matters. Sometimes the places that shake us most deeply become the places that change us forever. If this changed the way you see the story of Moses, share it with someone who needs this reminder. And subscribe if you want to explore the hidden meanings behind more biblical stories.